Well, welcome to a new Harry's Garage video, and this is a bit of a surprise video because we've just done at the Alfa studios a tour around that Alfa 33s to Dali. We have a little time before our flight back to the UK, and we're in the Alfa Museum, and I've got about half an hour. I'm going to rattle around this museum and some of the highlights. It's €12 to enter the Alfa Romeo Museum. There's all sorts of things here, but there are two secret floors here that we've just gone round as well. So with a bit of luck, if I really rush through this bit, I will show you those special floors that are not normally open to the public. Let's get going. Just before we enter the museum itself, this is a little bit I didn't know about. This is the early history of the badges for the Alfa Romeo, and initially it was Alfa. And the one thing I didn't realise, I always thought Alfa was a name of someone who established a company. No, it's not. It's actually initials. If you look at it, it has dots in between it, and it's anonymous Lombarda Factory Automobile. That's what it means, and Milano is actually where it was. The Alfa factory was then bought by Romeo, and it became Alfa Romeo Milano. This was the family crest of someone very famous in this area. That's the White Cross. It's history. This is the year they won the World Championship, so they put the reef around it, 1925, and then after the war, because of the war they lost the reef, they came to a simpler badge. But if you go down here, the other badges, how it developed, and then they got their confidence back and they went racing again, 1950, 1972, and then the modern badge as we know it today, 2015. So that's the history of the badges. Quickly past here, there's some aero engines. This is during the war period, they stopped producing cars and actually moved over to create military engines and planes and that sort of thing. It became a military company rather than a car company. Anyway, what I'm going to do now is go up this escalator up here and you'll see a bit more Alfa history here. It's very easy to find the Alfa Romeo Museum because it's right next to the motorways. You see here, as you come out of Milan, you'll see this great building here. Turn right and you're at the Alfa Museum. And also there's a great big shopping centre next door. Should you have partners that perhaps didn't want to look at Alfa Museum, there's plenty of entertainment just the other side of the road. Right, this is the early history of Alfa Romeo, 1910. So it's the first Alfa Romeo, I suppose. Alfa, 24 horsepower, 1910, and that was the early badge as you see it there, just Alfa without Alfa Romeo on it. Quite interesting, the lady who took us around, 24 horsepower this model. That's a slight lie, it's 42 horsepower, but they kept the horsepower declaration low because that meant they could save tax if you were buying the car. I'd love to show you a bit more of these cars. I suppose what are my favourites? These 6C Grand Sport and 8C 2300 Mille edition, absolutely beautiful. So look at this, yeah, now we're Alfa Romeo. Oh, Paris, I ought to just mention this. This car was delivered into France, and again, to save tax, they took it in assembly form out of Italy and then assembled it in France, Paris. And that is why the badge says Paris, because again, it meant there was a lot less car tax to pay on that particular model. And they were very expensive cars in these days. There was only the wealthy could really afford them. But look at this, an 8C 2300 quarter-millimetre, perfect. I mean, that has got to be as new. I've never seen one look like that because they're normally competition cars, but this is utterly stunning. Yeah, it has no kilometers recorded, and also they were right-hand drive, all these early cars. If you look at early Alfa Romeos, because it took over from the horse carriage and you were looking out at the side of the road, they drove on the right, but they wanted to look at the side of the road to look for obstacles and things, and the best way to do that was to have the steering wheel on the right hand side. And then in 1950 they said, hang on a minute, we should be driving with over there because you're overtaking cars, it'd be much more convenient, roads were better, and they moved to left hand drive, and then obviously it continued on. I'm not going to do any more details, you sort of know those models. Let's quickly go downstairs, and we're in the 1970s. Montreal, great colour on this one. I always love these lights. They remind me of sort of Miura or Daytona, and they flick up when you put the lights on. There is downstairs, and we should see it, the prototype Alfa Romeo Montreal. never actually meant to go into production because it had this V8 engine and it was just a show car, but there was great demand for it and they had to redesign the bonnet, but I'll show you that downstairs when we see the prototype. And an Alfa Sud, 1971, revolutionised Alfa Romeo, huge volumes, built in the south, and it was when the badge then lost having Milan on the badge, because it made no sense, because that was made in the south of Italy, and no longer were they only made in Milan. And it's still to this day, which I didn't realise, that Alfa Sud is the most successful model Alfa ever produced. Alfetta 1972, this is more complicated. It started to get the transaxle body on that with the gearbox at the back and became this handling car, much more expensive, four-door saloon. As you can tell, I am rattling through these, so I want to get to those secret floors, but those unmissable cars. I think Alfa 75, 1985 was the last car Alfa made before the Fiat takeover, and then the Alfa 164 1987 Pininfarina design, that was the first car after the Fiat takeover. I still think it's a super stylish car. I had a 166 and really enjoyed it, and it also introduced that V6 with those chrome pipes on it, and such a signature of Alfa Romeo in the 80s and 90s. 156, we had one of those, and 8C Competizione. I ought to actually, Charlie, let's just nip over to this, because this is actually the prototype car, show car, and if you look inside, if you can see it, if you probably can't see the reflections, it has a manual gearbox. Who would have thought a manual gearbox in an Alfa 8C? But there you go. Right, let's go down, head downstairs. Now this floor is full of sort of one-off and super rare Alfa Romeo models and their design studies, etc. Now this is Disco Volante 1952, glorious looking car. It reminds me of sort of D-Type C or XKSS perhaps, but this car, they designed it to race and then thought, hang on a minute, it's got knock-on wheels and the body is enveloping around the wheels and it would be very hard to actually change the wheels and tyres on it during a race, so it didn't actually race. But people didn't mind. I think there's a 5 of these, Charlie, and there's something like that. It's low numbers of this car, but just the most glorious looking car done by Touring. 2000 Sportiva. I've seen this car on the millimeter. This museum car does get let out, and lucky journalists occasionally drive it on the millimeter. 1954, a design study, a more aggressive Sportiva 2-litre though engine. This car did not actually come out. This was thought about, I can't remember what this one. This is the Giulia Sprint Speciale Prototypo 1965. Looks quite modern for 1965. Done by Bertoni, but they decided it wasn't quite right for the market at that time, so they no longer produce. This is the only one, so basically it's a prototype. But these 3 cars are just jewels for me. So this is a Carbo, this is 1968, this is the Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale given over to Bertoni design. What could you do it? And the great Marcello Gandini created this, and a Carbo is a sort of Beetle. And this was the forerunner, if you think 1968, to the Countach, because this, if you look at its doors, open vertically like that, and what a showstopper. 1968, and again, just the vision of Gandini to turn that Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale to this, I just find amazing. You would not recognise it, it was the same car. No, this one was done by Cesario, and this has a very special feature in it. It almost looks like a DeLorean or something with this crazy silver flake paint in it, but it had no safety belts in it. And he thought, well, I know what we could do. Rather than having safety belts, Cesario thought what a good idea it would be to have a waistcoat. So when you sat in the seat, you then put this waistcoat on, and that will keep you in place were you unlucky enough to have an accident. So this is Italo design, Cesario, and I presume this is about 1970, is it? I'm looking for a date, and I can't, sorry? 60. This is 1969. How modern were we thinking? Look at all that glass as well. You're absolutely cooking that, but just again, nothing like that Alfa Romeo 33 Stradale that we were looking at earlier. Final one, Pininfarina 33.2 Coupe Special 1969. This one, I think it's less successful for me. It looks not as unusual for Pininfarina because they normally get classic design beautifully done, but I think Bertoni beat them on this one. Great big scalp, this use of the quattrofolia, and that was the duct taking you in there, the engine all on show at the back. Unfortunately, it doesn't actually run this car, but that huge glass area, but also the lift-up doors, very similar to the 33, and the very extended front screen, and with pop-up lights on a tiny little Alfa grille at the front. Three superstars from, I think, this Alfa Museum that I would travel here just to see these three cars. I'm going to quickly rattle through these. If you're a fan of the Alfa 6C, apologies, but this part by now, 1939, 1950, this car, what got me when I saw this in the museum, this actually won Villa d'Este in 1950. I always thought Villa d'Este was a sort of classic event where you celebrated past champions, but actually Villa d'Este used to bring that year's coach-built cars to, and it was a competition who had the best car of the year, and this Alfa 6C 2300 Super Sport won Villa d'Este in 1950. Now, just quick, an 8C 29B Longo, because look at the size of it, 1938. What a statement car that must have been in 1938. If you're wondering what the noise is, there's a cinema next door, so we're going to quickly go through here and just see some other cars the other side of this hall. Giulietta Sprint 1954 here. Now the Giulietta name and Giulia name, famous in Alfa history. So it was Romeo and Juliet, girlfriend of Romeo was Juliet. That's where the name came from. It's the car you loved. That's why Italians are so passionate really about Alfa Romeo, in particular Giulietta and Giulia. So these are the early cars. There was this was Sprint Speciale, and it had a more streamlined body you see there, and it was meant for racing. Actually, it was slightly heavier than it should have been, and so pretty it didn't actually go racing because people took it to shows and showed it off because it's such a lovely design. This one they did race, it's a Giulietta SZ 1957, so this is Zagato bodied and was lighter and faster, so that one did do some racing, as did this, the TI Super of 1963, and that was the hero car because it was a four-door family saloon, but it went racing. So who didn't want that as your family car? My dad's got a racing car and he took me to school in it. Giulietta TZ 1963, even more so. Zagato, and this is with the chopped off tail. Sorry, I should have mentioned that on the previous car, but this is the Kamsin tail, the chopped off tail, more aerodynamic. That's TZ 1963. Sprint GT 1963, so this is the GTV arriving Junior 1.3, and this then led to the legendary Junior Sprint GTA 1965, so this is the lightweight one. It was around 200 kilos lighter than the standard GTV. This one, they use aluminium panels, and you spot them because they have this riveted around the door shut lines, etc., because it's got aluminium roof, aluminium wings on it, and they bolted onto this sort of steel structure underneath and just saved a shed load of weight. You also see the simpler grille on it. And then finally 1600 Junior Z 1972, a Zagato bodied, so front engine rear drive car, and that's the car that Gordon Murray has done as well, but he's done one with Alfaholics and a pretty trick engine in it. Right, it's quite noisy downstairs, but there's some very special cars down here. It's also a bit dark. Some amazing race cars in here. I'm going to have to be very quick though because there is music playing in here and I won't be able to talk over it and the lights go down. But look at these twin engine cars that Alfa Romeo were producing, and this was to get more horsepower. And what I couldn't get over on this car, that the driver was turning one engine off on cornering to make it more stable on the corners and then putting the second engine in. I mean, mad, supercharged, twin engine, 6-cylinder Alfas, one power in the right hand rear wheel and one power in the left hand rear wheel. I used to think it was an utter monster to drive. They then thought, hang on a minute, there might be a better way of doing this, and they did this inline twin engined car. So now we've moved up to 8-cylinder engines front and rear, and I can't remember what exactly the speed of this car was, but I think it was 300 322 kilometers an hour in 1935. That's the speed this car did, probably on not particularly good tarmac. And by now, you know, Ferrari was involved with this car, so he had joined Alfa Romeo, and this is one of his creations. In that, just Enzo Ferrari, extraordinary engineer, and this was early on in Alfa's history, 1935, bi-motor, mad thing. Glorious cars. Look at that 8C there. Right, the sound is all about to start up. So this is a mad period in Alfa's history. So this was just as the war was hitting, 1938. Can you imagine driving this car? The engine had moved to the rear. It was now a flat 12 engine, supercharged again. This is a supercharger on top. And look where the fuel tank is. You are surrounded by fuel. Fuel, the driver of this car. Complete madness. Special suspension on this is the oil tank at the back. De Dion rear suspension on it as well. But unfortunately, the war came. It never actually raced. And this is what these two cars are. But just as a mechanical device, just look at it. This is one of the special bodied Alfa 33 Stradales that were sent to designers to see what they could do with it. And this was, Pininfarina did this car, just extraordinary. 1971 this is, you can still see that little 8-cylinder engine in the back there, but look at the shape of this car. I mean, it's just so different to that curvy 33 Stradale we were looking at earlier. This was very different. It was the age of the wedge, and it almost looks like a beach buggy, but it packs that engine and just looks fast as anything. Now, these are the race cars. So this is the 33 Stradale. This dates from 1968. So this is the race version. You see it's much more air intake on it, much bigger, a streamline. It's got aero going on at the back. It's not that rounded one that Stradale had. Pure race. It's also got the extended wings, so they want a wider arch and things. And these were successful. 1970, 33 again. Now we're getting more, even more aerodynamic, longer tail, more stability. I love the rear view mirror up on stalks so they could see over the top. And by the time they got to this age, well, then the 33 gained a 12-cylinder engine that we'll look at in a moment. But these were the championship winning cars, and this is 1977 where they turbocharged the 12-cylinder engine. There's the 12-cylinder engine sitting over there. But these were the super successful, 8 wins in 8 races. Amazing result for Alfa Romeo, their return to racing with the Alfa 33. And just how much it developed from that original car of 1967. One of my favourites here, this 1965 Alfa TZ. So this is Zagato bodied and with the 1600 twin spark engine. This is TZ2, I should describe, because this is the evolution of it. A super successful racing car, but obviously road usable as well. Cut-off tail. Zagato was all about streamlining, make the car as fast as possible. So very compact, very streamlined, and actually a very successful racer in its day. These are just beautiful here. I'm not going to give any description, but I don't really have to say 1970 GTA's 1300 Junior with the pumped out arches. Same again here. And then that flat 12 engine went over to Formula One, and this was Brabham's attempt. So this is Gordon Murray with the Alfa Romeo engine. He then transferred over to McLaren, and that's this engine. This is ground effect. This car never actually raced. Now let's see what year this was. 1981. Test cars, it said, because as I say, it didn't actually race. It got outlawed before it had a chance to race. Love this wall of models here. I think what we're going to do now is go onto those 2 floors you don't normally see. Right, this is one of the secret floors, and we're going to have to rattle through this, unfortunately, because we're running out of time. We've got about 15 minutes. Just wanted to show you this. I couldn't get over this design where they just couldn't work out how to do the badging with a radiator that sloped in both ways. They said, I don't know what we'll do. We'll put 2 badges on it. So you've got a double badge Alfa Romeo there. What do we show? This was done in conjunction with Abarth, and was meant to receive the V10 engine, but unfortunately various regulation changes etc. meant it was a stillborn race car. But look at that, imagine Alfa Romeo heading out that, and it just reminds me of the Jaguar racing at Le Mans. Imagine if Alfa Romeo was headlining it with that. Now, this is one car I definitely wanted to show you. This is the Alfa Romeo Montreal show car. And as I say, it was never meant to go into production, but there was such a clamour for it, and they showed the V8 engine. It was for America with the V8 engine was the idea. They said, well, perhaps we ought to produce it after all as a limited run car. But you can see how different this is to the Montreal production car. It has a knacker duct at the front here and then a raised bonnet to fit the V8 engine in, which they'd never thought about because it wasn't going to be produced. And also see how the headlight sort of eyebrows are different on this car as well. But that is the show car, the prototype Alfa Romeo Montreal. This car is quite fun. This is sort of open Alfa Romeo Giulia Super, and the doors are being removed because this was actually just to get around the factory into your inn, and they could get in and out and move people around very quickly. So it just sort of ran around the factory and an easy way of moving people about. This is the RZ and the SZ car that was done with Zagato with this new resin. If I've ever lifted a bonnet on one of these, I was shocked how heavy it was. I thought it was like a carbon fibre, a lighter car, but no, they unfortunately were heavier than perhaps they should be, and they didn't go quite as well because of that, but I still love the design. It's known as the Monster. What else do we see? A single-seater GTV, look at that thing. I have no idea what that is. How bizarre. I think it's a sort of track car of some sort. This one was to prove how tough the Alfetta was, and this drove, I can't remember what, did it go north to south, didn't it? It did.
From like the top of Europe to Cape Town or something.
Yeah, top of Europe down to Cape Town, and it did it in 26,000 kilometres in 26 days or something. I love the protection on it to keep it going. What have we got round this corner? All sorts of four-door saloons I don't actually recognise at all. American market Alfa Romeos, yeah, they were trying to take over, but they were expensive, I suppose, compared to the Ford car. This one, I remember this, Alfa 164 Cloverleaf. Now this was four-wheel drive, no less, and just so luxurious. They sold a handful of them because they didn't think of Alfa Romeos doing a four-wheel drive car. That was Audi in the Quattro, but no, Alfa did it with a 164. Me Too, it was done in that Pacific colour for the brochures, but never actually went into production with that colour, but it really shone in the brochures. Yeah, I think we'll quickly dash to the other floor where there's some real magic cars. Oh, this, yeah, look at this one. Alfa Romeo 75 Turbo Evolution. So this had the wider arches on it and turbo, 2-litre turbo there. That is an Alfa, I'll just check, yes, that is an Alfa Romeo 156 GTA. And I remember seeing it, and it wasn't quite as pumped up as I imagined the GTA was going to be when they actually showed it. It was a little tame, although I love these sort of air vents to replicate those earlier cars. But downstairs, there's an Evolution version of that, a madder one, which I've never seen before. Let's go and have a look downstairs. Oh. Now, there's lots of things to see on this floor, so I'm going to really rattle through. But look at this. This is a 164 Pro car. Now this, you had to sell 25,000 cars a year before you were allowed to enter this championship, and this raced with the V10 engine in it as well. Can you imagine the sound and noise of that racing? Well, I can, because you go onto YouTube and you'll see it. But basically, it's a four-seater saloon. I love the way they've kept the doors here. If you come around here, Charlie, look at the badging on the back. Yeah, it's got a V10 engine up the front, but if you're following it, it says 164 Twin Spark. Don't think so. Yeah, a couple of Alfa Romeo Jeeps. Apparently they're known as the mad car because they bounced around and were huge fun off-road, but wasn't really a successful car for Alfa Romeo. This is a stillborn SUV from the early noughties. I've not seen this before, but it was sort of along, just as when Porsche Cayenne was coming out, there was Alfa looking at doing this, but they didn't actually produce it. This is a concept car that never even saw the light of day. No idea, sorry, I don't know what they are. Almost looks hyena-like. Oh, this was a taxi that Alfa Romeo thought would be a good idea, so it's Giulia design again, four-door, and it was going to be for the American market, but it didn't actually come out. But and then this was 3 days. This was another sort of a Renault Espace-esque Alfa Romeo that only remained in the design studios, never actually came out. And I can see there's 2 seats at the back. It's a 6-seater, but very comfortable seating in it. Another concept car. Apologies, I don't know what they are. This was all sorts of concept cars down here.
Sud, wasn't it?
No, Alfa Sud is the next one. This is a Disco Volante Coupe. So we saw that beautiful car downstairs with the enclosed wheels, XKS look-alike. Well, there's the coupe version of it. Two concept cars, super wedged on, I think the Alfetta 75, I think it was this, wasn't it? And then another amazing Giugiaro design. Can you believe this is an Alfa Sud under this extraordinary bodywork done by Giugiaro Ital Design, and a completely different take on the Alfa grille. Oh God, come on Charlie, let's see what you can do. 2600 SZ, didn't even know it existed, that car. Drivetrain from that Alfa 164 four-wheel drive version I was showing you up, so the Q4, there it is, all on display. 75, well, quickly come down here. Oh, this was such a period in Alfa's racing history, the 155 V6 Ti. This is Nannini and Nannini racing each other. Nannini was infamous because he only had one arm, so he couldn't change gear, normal gear change. So I think it was the initial paddle he was designing this. Can you imagine racing with one hand and winning the number of races he did? But God, it's just glorious looking car in the Martini colours. Two other race Alfa Romeos, Larini, I think these were racing in America. Alfa 75 Turbo Evolution IMSA. Look at the arches on this car. If you come close up, have you ever seen wider box arches than on that Alfa Romeo there? I think it was this is the original GTAM. I do not remember this in the UK. We're wondering if it's an Italian special or Italian market special, because I'm sure we didn't get a GTAM in the UK. But wow, it looks much more aggressive than the actual version we've got. You can see at the back again, the box arches, and coming into the doors as well. Very unusual, great to see. Finally down here, two cars. This is the SZ Junior. Now, we're not exactly sure what this is, but look at the scoop up there. Is it mid-engined? What is this car? It doesn't look, there's a radiator at the back. I have no idea why this Junior has this scoop on it. Might be worth a Google. I think it's still front engine, but is that just for gearbox and diff cooling? I do not know. Now this is an interesting car. This was shown in 2006, and it seems to me a bit of a mix between the Alfa 4C and then the 33 Stradale that we've just been looking at. You can see the doors all come up there. It's almost got the sunroof built into the doors, mid-engine. It almost has an Enzo look about it. Not sure if that was actually shown in public. I don't remember it, but a very pretty Alfa Romeo mid-engine car. Finally, what have we got down here? Alfa Sud Sprint, but enhance again, the big arches on it, the box arches there, which is a bit of a theme. These are quite fun down here. So this was the ring time Alfa, took an Alfa 4C to it, did an 8-minute 04 lap, signed by it. You can see how they've sealed all the shut lines on it, try and gain those extra miles an hour. Beautiful colour on that 4C. I don't remember that one in production. Tonali, this is the concept car. I can remember being at Geneva when this was unveiled, and then an 8C sort of style in Buck when they're obviously designing how they do it. Looks like a machining, and they're deciding on the final look of it. And then around here, well, these cars you'll never see again. These were sort of development cars that they were disguised so people wouldn't recognise them as Alfa Romeo. I think they would have spotted that one. But there's the Julius Super, not an Alfa badge on it anywhere, but that was the prototype car. And the favourite of all is probably this one, because it says Rover. Doesn't look like a Rover I've ever seen. It looks like a Triumph 2000 or something like that. But yeah, that is how engineers used to disguise cars in the 50s and 60s, so people didn't realise it was a new Alfa Romeo coming out. So I'm sorry that was so rushed. That was a surprise video, but I hope you enjoyed this tour around the museum, around these very special floors you don't normally see at the museum. Hope you enjoyed the tour. If you did, well, keep watching, keep subscribing. More videos coming on very soon.